In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade talk around the Boston Bruins, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. With the Leafs, we're going to talk about as well how this offseason's decisions could impact the future of top forward Austin Matthews. Plus, we also have some prospect signings, some more announcements over the latest awards, and playoff updates as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about today. Let's get started with information and news from last night's playoff action with the beginning of round 2. We saw the Tampa Bay Lightning defeat the Florida Panthers 4-1 in Game 1. Of course, that was in Florida's home arena as well, so not a good start for the Panthers. The two-time champion Lightning certainly looked like the better team by far, completely shutting down the Panthers. Vasilevsky was good. The Panthers' power play continued to stink. Still 0 for the playoffs, which is not good at all. I mean, obviously, for the most part here, Florida wasn't doing too bad early on, but then they had a goal called back, which was kind of an odd situation, something you don't really see much, but happened a few years ago with the San Jose Sharks, which caused a new rule back. I think it was about 3 to 4 years ago. We had a new rule come in that coaches could challenge if a puck went out of play, if there should have been a stoppage in play that resulted in a goal. They can review that. So the shot went towards the net, got deflected, went up, hit the netting, came down. Anthony Duclair scores. And the goal was called a good goal. I'm not sure how any referee didn't see that. I know the referee that was in that end, he had his back to that mesh, so I could see how he didn't see it, but I'm not sure how the others didn't. But anyway, Cooper had to challenge it, and it got overturned pretty easily. But still, after that, it seemed to really shift the momentum back to Tampa. Kind of sucked the life out of the Panthers and the crowd. And even though they had a sold-out crowd, a lot of the crowd went home early. Within about 4 or 5 minutes to go, that arena was pretty empty. It kind of looked like the old days when they were struggling with attendance, which I know, unfortunately, I've seen some people kind of picking on. But the arena was indeed sold out. It was packed early on. Just a lot of people gave up once they knew the game was out of reach. So they'll go game 2 here. We'll see if they can make some adjustments, but the Lightning by far the better team. Last night, of course, the Avalanche beat the Blues 3-2 in overtime. Now, if you didn't watch that game, you would think that it was a really tightly contested game, but it really was not. St. Louis scored in the first period with Ryan O'Reilly getting them on the board. The Blues weren't too bad in the first, but as time went on, the Avalanche just picked up more and more steam, and it was just slanted. Like the ice was slanted big time against the Blues, but the Avs just kept coming with speed and more speed and more speed and shots. They hit a lot of posts early on, but still it just kept coming. To me, the Avalanche just steamrolled St. Louis last night, and if it wasn't for Jordan Binnington, this wouldn't have been an overtime game at all. This would have been probably, instead of 3-2, probably about 7, 8, 9-2. Like, he was outstanding. His best game by far since the 2019 Cup run. So it looks like for now, at least, we can say the old Jordan Binnington to help the Blues win the Cup was back, and it's a good darn thing, because without him, that was they would have been slaughtered. I mean, the Avalanche would just look like they're unstoppable right now. But we saw round 2 last year in the playoffs as well, is when things came on change. But Vegas made some big adjustments, and it slowly turned against them, and they took over. So we'll see if the Blues can make adjustments. I don't know. It's going to mean, thankfully, like, Binnington kept things close. He made over 50 saves, and in the overtime period even, the Avalanche outshot the Blues 13-0. So St. Louis is a really good hockey team. I said they would make it tough and challenging on the Avs for sure, but they're going to have to do a better job at trying to slow them down if they're going to have any chance at all on winning, and not only the series, but even a few games to make it close. And Binnington's going to have to keep up his play. If he slips even a little bit and becomes a little bit ordinary, they're going to be doomed. So some great action there last night. But the Tampa and Florida game wasn't as entertaining as we were hoping for. I was hoping it would be a little bit nastier, a little bit more physicality, and it just wasn't as interesting. It was a bit of a snoozer, in my opinion. The Avs game was good. That one was a little bit more entertaining. But tonight we've got the Battle of Alberta, which should be a real solid game. Looking forward to that one. Edmonton against Calgary. And of course, in the Eastern Conference, the earlier game will be the New York Rangers doing battle with the Carolina Hurricanes. So we'll see how that goes in game one of those series tonight. Ben Chiarot, of course, plays for the Panthers, did receive a fine last night. He got a $5,000 fine for headbutting against Lightning forward Ross Colton. Now, I know there's some people looking at that saying, well, the Oilers defenseman Darnell Nurse, he was suspended a game for the same thing. But if you look at each play, Darnell Nurse's headbutt was way more egregious, way more potential to hurt somebody than the Chiarot one was. So that's the reasoning for the fine, because neither one really, had a history per se. Like, it's not like they had a lot going against them, but that's the rationale behind that one. We got the finalists today for the Lady Byng Trophy. We got Jacob Slavin of the Coyotes, Kyle Connor of the Winnipeg Jets, and Jared Spurgeon of the Minnesota Wild. I know a lot of uproar about Spurgeon. Thankfully, they don't consider playoff action for this. This is a regular season award because, of course, early in round one, we saw Spurgeon basically try to shatter the ankle of Pavel Buchnevich in St. Louis, and that is just not what this trophy is about. But at the end of the day, they all had really good regular seasons, with good results, with very little penalties, which is part of the criteria in order to qualify. So some good options there. Hard to say exactly who wins for sure. Some prospect signings today as well. The New York Rangers have signed prospect Gustav Rydell. Now, he's a 27-year-old undrafted free agent, so he's not really a traditional prospect. He'll come into the NHL as a prospect, given the fact he's never played and was never drafted, but he's very mature at the age of 27. He's a 6'3", 200-pound center out of Sweden who played in the SHL this year, putting up 30 points in 45 games. So I'm not really sure where he'll slot in their organization. If he'll have a shot at making the team, he'll have to play in the minors. I don't know where he'll fit, but certainly going to be interesting to see what they do with him. And another player in a similar situation, not quite as old though, the Calgary Flames have signed an undrafted European free agent as well, Adam Klapka, who's a 6'7", 240-pound center/winger out of the Czech Republic. I'm not familiar with this player. He's 21 years old, so we'll see. But he just the pure thought of what he could be. I mean, he's a huge guy. So be interesting to see what they can do with him next year. The Flyers have signed a 22-year-old prospect, Adam Ginning, who's a Swedish defenseman taken in 2018 in the second round. It sounds promising if you look at his size and stats, but overall the reports are that he hasn't really developed and progressed a whole lot since his draft year. He's 6'4", 205 pounds. He's been playing in Sweden. Was drafted with a lot more promise, but at this point hasn't come to North America and hasn't worked out. I'm not sure what their plans will be. He'll definitely need time in the AHL from what we're hearing. The St. Louis Blues as well have signed Vadim Shirenko, who was a 7th rounder in 2019. He's a Russian goalie, 21 years old, 6'2", played in Liga this year rather than play in Russia. Now, we also got some more news when it comes to coaches and GMs and contracts and all that kind of stuff. Barry Trotz, we know, interviewed with the Winnipeg Jets, is also scheduled to interview with the Philadelphia Flyers coming up. I believe it's sometime this week. I think Thursday was the estimated time that's likely going to be taking place. It may not be till after, because I know a lot of Flyers management is over at the World Championship watching some prospects. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to take place, or maybe it's not going to take place in person. Maybe it'll be remote, like a Zoom meeting or something. I'm not really sure, but he is going to be meeting with the Flyers about their head coaching vacancy, and we'll see where he goes. So the Jets and Flyers are in the mix. We expect Vegas to be in the mix from what all the reports indicate, but time will tell what happens. When it comes to a couple of GMs, the LA Kings GM Rob Blake, he's on an expiring contract. His contract is set to expire at the end of June. Word is today, even though the team has not announced it, I've seen John Hoven, who is very well plugged in with the Kings, and other reporters indicating that Blake and the Kings have agreed on a 3-year contract extension to remain as the general manager for that time frame. Likely won't be announced for a little bit here, probably sometime in the next week or so was what reports indicate on that. So that's not really surprising news. Blake's done a good job in LA, and obviously didn't expect him to be going anywhere. The Boston Bruins had their end of season media availability, you could say, and Don Sweeney, the GM there, did also confirm that he's on an expiring contract as well. His words were that he was expecting it to be taken care of in short order. So I assume that means an extension, unless he's planning on resigning and didn't say anything, which I don't really think that would be the case. So I would imagine that Don Sweeney will get a new deal to continue being the general manager of the Boston Bruins. I know after all this time and some early exits recently, there's certainly some talk about Bruce Cassidy and his future, but I don't expect there to be any changes there either from what we're hearing. I believe both the GM and the coach in Boston will carry on with their existing roles. Now, with Boston as well, there was certainly some talk between Cassidy and Sweeney's availability, mostly Cassidy talking about Jake Debrusk trade requests and whether or not he sees him sticking around in Boston. Essentially, Cassidy said that Jake Debrusk really handled things well. The whole team did. They came together. They made it work for what they had. He said he was proud of how he played, in that, he told Jake that. And essentially, it sounds like the Bruins have asked Jake DeBrusk if he would reconsider or kind of take back that trade request because they were happy with him down the stretch. And I believe the response was that he would think about it. But for right now, that trade request is still on the table. He has not told the Bruins that he does not want to be traded. I would imagine that they'll all kind of take a breath here for a little while. Usually this time of year, we don't usually see a lot of trade activity just yet. There's lots of talking that usually gets started, lots of rumors surface, but most of the action and the actual business typically gets dealt with a little bit later once we're into June, a little closer to the end of the season or closer to the draft is usually when things really heat up. But this is the time of year when there's lots of chatter about what might happen. But will DeBrusk stay? Will he go? It sounds like a lot of that's going to boil down to how he feels. If he says, you know what, I'm happy to stay put, because he did get a contract extension. They thought, I'm sure, that it would be easier to trade him with a contract than without. And he played well down the stretch. So at the same time, the Bruins have to think about it and say, you know what, his value would be better now than it's been probably in the last 2 years. He has a contract that's reasonable, and he played well. So if we're concerned that that's going to be an inconsistent thing, which was what their concerns were with him in the past, maybe they move him anyway. It's hard to say, but it seems like the ball is mostly in his court, but time will tell here as how he all feels and how the Bruins feel, but still a chance that he could be traded since that request has not been rescinded. Elliotte Friedman today between 32 Thoughts podcast and the Jeff Merrick show talking a bit about Kevin Fiala. Mentioned, of course, we talked a bit about New Jersey and Ottawa being a couple potential destinations should Fiala be traded, which many expect to be a high probability given the Minnesota Wild cap situation and the fact that they had contentious negotiations last year. We know that Bill Guerin himself said that there's a lot of uncertainty around the future of Fiala with the franchise, which leads a lot of people to think that there's a good chance he will be traded for picks and prospects. Now, of course, there are some other options. They could trade Matt Dumba. They could trim money elsewhere, like the Dumba contract or elsewhere, and try to find a way to keep him. But that's all going to depend, too, on what he wants for a deal, which right now is difficult to say. He did have a phenomenal season in the regular season, didn't have so great of a playoff, but his value would be high when it comes to negotiating on a longer-term deal. So hard to say about another team besides the Devils or the Senators that we haven't really talked about yet, but Friedman feels is likely in the mix here is the Los Angeles Kings. And if you think about it, it makes sense. They're very much likely going to try to add another scorer and another defenseman. I think they made some good progress. The team did well. They made the playoffs. First round loss, sure. But you know what? They weren't even certainty to make the playoffs this year, and they got in. So the team matured. We saw good progress. And based on comments from the team themselves and what many of the insiders think, we're probably going to see the Kings try to add another scorer up front. And Fiala very well could fit the bill. He's young enough that he could be a big part of the future. And they have a loaded prospect pool, so they'd have no problem parting with a prospect or two along with maybe a pick to get that deal done. So the Kings would have a lot of players that the Wild would be very much interested in. I mean, the Senators are in a similar boat. I think they could certainly give a good option there too. I'm not sure about New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey does have a lot of good young players. I'm just not so sure how anxious they would be to part with them because I don't think they have quite as many, in my opinion. But still, the Kings are probably the deepest of the three, so might have the best chance to put together a trade. Time will tell on that front. Now, on The Athletic, we also have a report from Jesse Granger, which I did reference a few days ago, but I just want to talk a little bit further about it with some of the players we didn't get into. He mentioned in that article some names that we could see traded because they clearly have a big cap problem. They need to become cap compliant. It sounds like Mark Stone's getting back surgery and is expected to be ready to go next year. So we're not expecting to see them deep into LTIR again. Jack Eichel will be healthy. Stone will be healthy. And hopefully they can have a better season when it comes to that kind of stuff and keep everybody on the ice. But still, they're way over the cap. Money needs to go out to get things in order here. Now, what might happen? We talked about Robin Lehner. Max Pacioretty's another name. Granger does say that he feels Pacioretty trade is less likely given the fact that his value is probably not high because of the amount of time he missed this year, and he is arguably one of their best pure scorers, so you may not want to move him. But one name that in a way is surprising, but in a way it's not because they're facing such a crunch here, is Alec Martinez. I know they brought him back after their runs to deep, a couple deep playoff runs here. He was a big part of that, and they really wanted to add that experience, capable defenseman on the back end that played a big role in their past playoff success. But Martinez may not now be a luxury they can't afford. I'd suggested before that if they wanted to keep Martinez, they might have to move Theodore, which I'm sure they're not crazy about. But if I were other teams, I would be calling Vegas about Theodore. He's a very underrated dynamic defenseman that would be very intriguing on a lot of other clubs. But like I said, they would probably prefer him. He's younger, more dynamic, but Martinez gives you a different element, right? So I don't know that they're going to want to give up Theodore to keep Martinez. So Martinez might be the more likely guy to get dealt. So another name there to watch. Like I said, Leonard's less likely. I think now that Deboer's gone, I think the relationship there is that he have a chance for a fresh start with a new coach. So I think there's a better chance he stays. Pacioretty probably stays. Dadonov might go. They already tried to trade him once. So Dadonov and Martinez might be your most likely candidates. Whether or not to bring back Riley Smith is debatable as well. Now, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, of course, the big talk here after another first-round exit. I've listened to comments here on a variety of platforms talking about the future of the Leafs. Listen to Chris Johnson on his program on the CJ Show. Also listen to the other Sportsnet program, Bourne and Kipper, talking about the Leafs as well. Read a few articles. And you know what? One thing that came up on a variety of these situations here that made a lot of sense that I hadn't thought of yet, but a lot of the decisions that the Maple Leafs make this offseason could have a major impact on the future of star player Austin Matthews. He's only got 2 more years on his contract, so he's not that far away from free agency, and nobody has any indication that Matthews wants to leave, has talked about leaving, is going to leave, anything like that. So I don't want anybody coming at me saying, you're saying Matthews is gone. No, I'm not. But certainly he's a player who wants to win at all costs. You can know he's a very competitive guy. He's accomplished a ton personally. It's time to have that team success. And if it's not going to be there, they're not happy with the direction of the team, that would be the only thing I would think that could possibly impact the future of him in Toronto. And right now, they have another year to go before they can extend his contract. So this coming year, to me, is pivotal on getting not only for the team to succeed, but to make sure that he wants to re-sign and become a Leaf for the rest of his career, or at least close to it. And that's quite important to the long-term success. That would be an epic failure for the Leafs if they lost Matthews for nothing. The other thing, too, is that he has in the final year of his contract, he has a no-move clause. So they couldn't even trade him in that final year without his say, so he'd have complete control. So this is not that they would want to trade him, but if they thought they weren't going to sign him or that he was going to leave, they might consider it at that point only. But anyways, this whole point here is not to say that we're not talking about Matthews leaving, but the future of Matthews in Toronto could be impacted by next year's results. That, I think, is fair to say. Because every player of that magnitude especially is going to want to evaluate their options and say, do I still have that great chance to win here? And if I do, I'm going to stay and make it happen, see it through. If not, and I think the team is going in a bad direction, maybe I leave. That's the only reason I think that happened. But one target that we looked at here, that we talked a bit about, will Spezza and Giordano come back on short-term cheap deals? That's a possibility. It's quite likely Ilya Mikheyev doesn't come back because he's probably somebody who they can't afford any longer. They might need to revamp the middle, bottom six a little bit. We talked a bit about from Elliot Friedman saying that it's maybe a Kawhi trade this year, saying like the Raptors had to do, trade a popular. Now, a lot of people are misinterpreting that too. I think what Friedman meant was they might not have a choice but to take a popular, really good player and trade them for another really good player, but a different style of player to change up the dynamic of the team and have a better shot at winning in the playoffs. That's how I took it. I mean, I realized Kawhi was a top 5 player in the NBA who was disgruntled and had his team in San Antonio basically forced them to trade him. Now, is there a player like that in the NHL right now? No, there really isn't one that fits that bill. But I don't think that's really what Elliott meant. I think what he meant was it's going to be a case of one big player for another big player, and it might be, a tough decision emotionally because a player that has to go might be a popular player that a lot of people like. That's what he meant. So that's why I'm thinking, would a guy like Nylander fit that bill? I know the Nylander rumors come up every year, and I'm not trying to add to that, but Matthews and Marner are not going anywhere. Neither is Tavares. Neither is Morgan Riley. Goaltending is a debatable situation right now. We've heard that the first negotiations with Campbell have not gone well. So there is a possibility he doesn't come back. And I've seen a few people point out, Jack Campbell is a good goaltender, but if you look through his results for the whole year, I don't know if it's fair to call him an elite level goaltender. He's good, but he had his times where he struggled too, which kind of brings his numbers back down to earth. I'm not suggesting they don't bring him back. I think they very well could. But if things don't work out there, I kind of wonder if that Kawhi trade, could it be for John Gibson out of Anaheim? He would be the top goaltender, in my opinion, that would be available for trade, that would come in with term, who is really, really good, would be considered an upgrade, in my opinion, and somebody who is in the same boat in Anaheim, who after the clearing out of all those pending UFAs, a lot of people wonder if he might want a trade, given the fact that he's getting later into his 20s and he wants to win now too, before it gets too late in his career. And the Ducks are going to be rebuilding here, which is clear with all the signals they sent at the deadline, and that maybe he's a guy that would be traded to a top team this year, and the Leafs could be that team. I mean, they might prefer to get Campbell, and if they can get Campbell at a reasonable number that's going to be lower than Gibson's contract, maybe they do that. I'm not saying they won't, but if things don't work out with Campbell, I kind of wonder, because there's no trade rumors connecting Gibson to the Leafs. That's my own personal opinion, but there have been plenty of trade rumors around Gibson. And of course, the Nylander rumors come out every year around this time after the first round loss. That seems to be a tradition at this point amongst Toronto media. So will Nylander be the guy that goes to get a big name player in the Leafs to change things up? I don't know. He might be. He would probably be one of the more likely guys, but I can't say with any kind of certainty. But you know what? With Gibson's situation in Anaheim, it does kind of make sense. But we'll see how things play out. Do you think Jack Campbell is likely to return? Or could we see a significant goalie trade to solidify that position to help get them over that first round hump and have a better shot at a Stanley Cup? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.